Just days after announcing tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, President Trump already suggesting he scored one victory. Today, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum announced that Mexico has come to an agreement to delay tariffs by at least 1 month after agreeing to send 10,000 soldiers to the border. It'll certainly be an early victory lap for the negotiator-in-chief who has vowed to use tariffs against allies since the campaign trail. Joining me now is the Hill's White House reporter, Brett Samuels. Brett, thanks so much for joining us. Mexico's president and Trump spoke today. They came to an agreement. They both confirmed. What do we know about this deal? And are tariffs still on the table for China and for Canada?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, Trump and the Mexican president had this conversation this morning that essentially resulted in this victory lap essentially for Trump, where he got to say that he got something out of it. Mexico is supposed to send about 10,000 National Guard troops to the southern border, to the U.S.-Mexico border, to help curb both the flow of migrants and the flow of fentanyl and drugs into the United States. And as a result, they're putting tariffs on pause for a month while they further negotiate that. As far as Canada and China are concerned, those are still expected to go into effect at midnight. Trump is supposed to talk to Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, again later Monday afternoon. So we'll see if they can maybe find an off-ramp. But as of now, it seems like Mexico is the only country that's going to be able to stave off these tariffs.
So Mexico in the clear for now, it sounds like. But is Europe next? Are we going to see an import or an impact rather on this trade war on U.S. goods?
Yeah, it certainly seems like Trump has his eye on the European Union. He told reporters on Sunday night when he got back from Florida that the EU trade practices as it relates to the U.S., he called it an atrocity. He has for weeks really kind of been railing against the European Union, suggesting that the U.S. will take action against them to put more tariffs in place. So certainly, he has talked about semiconductor chips, about pharmaceuticals, about steel and aluminum as possible sectors he might target. So something to keep an eye on for later this month, potentially.
Mm-hmm. And President Trump went after the Wall Street Journal after the editorial board, as you know, called his tariffs the, quote, dumbest trade war in history. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had this to say over the weekend.
I am saying to President Trump, stop these tariffs. You campaigned on lowering prices. You campaigned on this wallet. But your tariffs will have more money come out of this wallet for so many goods and services, for food, for clothing, for cars.
So you hear Schumer there, Brett, but I'm wondering, are Republican lawmakers speaking out about this? What has been the reaction from inside the party?
Yeah, it's been sort of few and far between as far as Republicans speaking out. We saw Mitch McConnell, the former Republican Senate leader, went on 60 Minutes and essentially said that he didn't understand why you would take action that may raise prices for U.S. consumers, as tariffs are expected to do. You had Rand Paul of Kentucky, the other Kentucky senator, who doesn't always agree with Mitch McConnell, but on this, he came out and said that conservatives used to be sort of opposed to this kind of thing that would raise prices for consumer and amount to a tax on consumers, basically. So, you have those two Kentucky senators speaking out, but otherwise, most Republicans seem to be in line with Trump on this and arguing that, this is an appropriate use of tariff power as sort of a leverage tool against Canada, Mexico, and China.
We're also seeing the stock market, unfortunately, taking a beating today. Futures declined. Where are we seeing the biggest sell-offs, the biggest impact?
Yeah, so, the Dow we saw and the NASDAQ were down, right at the start of trading this morning on Monday. That was going to be a key indicator, I think, that a lot of folks were watching because Trump imposed these tariffs on a Saturday. Markets were closed. And Trump, of course, we know likes to look at the stock market for sort of validation. He loves to point out, when the stock market's at a high under his watch. So certainly it'll be interesting to sort of track how he responds to the stock market if the sell-off continues, if investors continue to be sort of spooked by this potential trade war, if that maybe makes Trump reconsider his next steps.
That's right. And 3 of Trump's controversial nominees faced Senate committees last week, and Director of National Security nominee Tulsi Gabbard was grilled over Edward Snowden. Let's take a listen.
Your quotes. Brave. Please join my bipartisan legislation calling for charges to be dropped against him. Do you disagree that legislation was not appropriate? Do you believe he is brave or not?
Yeah,
back those words?
Once again, Senator, Edward Snowden broke the law. He also released information that exposed the United States government's illegal
your
programs.
legislation and your words are still your beliefs? Yes or no, please?
And Brett, over the weekend, Tulsi Gabbard wrote an op-ed in Newsweek explaining why she is the right choice. In her words, do you think she faces the steepest uphill battle to get confirmed?
I think that's definitely a fair characterization. You know, when you look at her, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Kash Patel, sort of, you know, the three nominees who I think probably are facing the toughest confirmation battles. I would say Patel, the FBI director nominee, is probably on the safest footing because Republicans seem to be mostly behind him. Then RFK Jr., who still does have some work to do, and then Gabbard, I think, definitely does have the steepest hill to climb because you have not just Democrats who seem concerned about that nomination, but a handful of Republicans who have expressed concerns about her comments about Edward Snowden, her comments about foreign surveillance, her comments about the war in Russia, her comments about Syria from years ago. So there's really kind of this pileup of areas where Gabbard has sort of sparked concerns on both sides of the aisle.
House Republicans, as you know, Brett, are expected to mark up a budget resolution this week. How close are we to a package at this point?
Yeah, so Republicans in the House laid out sort of a fairly ambitious timeline to have this reconciliation package with Trump's agenda or his key agenda items passed through the House by the end of April or early May at the latest. So it is around that time that they're hoping to mark up a budget. They're hoping to get this ball rolling. But, you know, the Republican conference, especially in the House, is very sort of fractious. It's hard to get everyone on the same page. Of course, they'll have to sort of meld with the Senate Republicans to figure out how to move this forward. So, you know, it seems like we're going to be seeing some initial movement on this in the coming days and weeks, but certainly it's going to be a tight fit, I think, for Republicans to stay on this schedule that they've laid out for themselves.
Do you think they will stay on the schedule, this timeline that House Speaker Mike Johnson has kind of set forth? Will that jive with Trump's agenda moving forward? Yeah,
it's a great question. And I think, you know, if you look back to 2017, Trump's first term, he signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was his big signature tax legislation. He signed that into law in December, so the very end of his first year in office. So I think that goes to show that these things can get off track. They can take a lot longer than folks are anticipating, especially when tax policy is involved. So I do think that May is sort of an ambitious timeline. We'll see if it slips farther into the summer, but certainly that's sort of the guiding post right now for Republicans.
And quickly, before I let you go, Brett, one more question. Government funding, as you know, set to run out on March 14th. Republicans have a one-vote majority, and history shows that Republicans can't seem to pass government funding simply on their own. Are Democrats going to be able to use that to their advantage?
I think that's certainly the hope for Democrats. And to your point, you know, we saw at the end of last year when a government shutdown was looming and a funding shutdown was looming, that Democrats had to ultimately come on board to help Republicans. It seems like time and again that's what ends up happening. Republicans can't just pass these things without Democratic votes. So I think that'll be worth watching. How do Democrats try to use this to their advantage? What sort of concessions do they try to extract over these negotiations, whether it be on the debt ceiling or on some kind of policy like immigration? I think Democrats certainly are kind of eyeing this funding showdown to see how they can use it to their advantage.
Brett Samuels, thank you so much.
Thanks, Judy.
At first light this morning, crews began the extremely technical and sensitive process of removing what remains of the CRJ-700 plane from the Potomac, as well as the remains of the passengers who are still inside. News Nation's Alina Shirazi has the latest from the site.
Well, Judy, there's still 12 people that remain. They have to be found in the Potomac. You can see over my right shoulder that barge is there and a crane working to remove pieces of that plane. We are told it did separate into 3 pieces. It looks to be like an engine that is being removed right now and lifted from that crane. But their main focus today is the fuselage, meaning the main body of the plane. And once that they can get that up and out of the Potomac, they are fairly confident that they can find those 12 people. They say this is an extremely delicate and technical process. But let's look at where the investigation stands. The big question here is why these helicopters have been allowed to fly so close to where these planes land. And as a result, the FAA put a no-fly zone around the airport for helicopters. Whether that will last, we don't know, but we do know that is in effect now. But these are questions that, of course, remain to be answered. And people want answers. But data from the crash shows conflicting altitude readings. The black box shows the helicopter was around 325 feet, while a reading in the control tower had the plane at 200 feet. 55 victims have now been identified, and again, still 12 people that they have to find, and they can't do that until they pull all the wreckage up and out of the water. The Army has also identified the third Black Hawk soldier killed in the crash. Captain Rebecca Lobach, she was a 6th-year Army member. Her friends say she was a fearless and a talented pilot. And investigators say the Black Hawk pilots did have those night vision goggles. However, it was unclear whether or not they were wearing that at the time of the collision and whether or not that could have stopped this tragedy from happening. Judy.
News Nation's Alina Shirazi, thank you. Beyonce finally becomes the queen bee of the Grammys as stars mix music and politics at the annual awards show. Beyonce taking home the biggest prize of the night on Sunday in LA, winning Album of the Year for her country music debut with Cowboy Carter. It's the first time she's won the top award. It also marks the first time this century that a Black woman is the Album of the Year winner. Lauryn Hill won the Album of the Year Grammy back in 1999. And lots of performers not only using their voices to sing at the Grammys, but to speak out about hot-button issues. Lady Gaga offering words of support for the transgender community after President Trump last week signed an executive order restricting access to gender-affirming care for transgender children and teens younger than 19. Lady Gaga picking up the Grammy for Best Pop Duo for her song with Bruno Mars, Die With a Smile. The singer telling the audience that, quote, trans people are not invisible and trans people deserve love. Shakira also putting the spotlight on immigration. The Colombian singer dedicating her Best Latin Pop Album Grammy Award to her, quote, immigrant brothers and sisters in this country. Shakira saying to Applause, quote, you are loved, you are worth it, and I will always fight with you. And Alicia Keys making a plea for diversity at the Grammys. The fallen singer snagging the night's Global Impact Award and saying during her acceptance speech, DEI is not a threat, it's a gift. And the more voices, the more powerful the sound. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Judy Kurtz. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.